Hi, everybody. Welcome to another edition of All Things Aviation and Aerospace. We're live streaming, simulcasting on Zoom webinar, as well as Private Air Media Group's YouTube channel and Facebook Live page. Welcome to the show. It's the last show we did live was from Textron Aviation, and we're back in the studio here, and I'm looking forward to this. I say it every week, every show, but I am really looking forward to this one for a few reasons. My two guests are two of my favorite people. They are friends and colleagues, and I've known them for a number of years, and they are pretty amazing in terms of what they do in this industry. So it's really an honor to have both of them here and to be able to have a chat about all things business aviation and what the industry offers, its significance, its value, and the opportunities that exist, sometimes understated or even overlooked, but it's definitely a great industry, and we'll all attest to that. And the other thing is that, and it has to be said, that it's still somewhat a predominantly male-driven industry, so it's really great to have two ladies on that are both extremely experienced at the top of their game, leaders of their flight departments, and just have amazing careers that they'll share with us about how they got started and how they got to where they are now. So, as they say, without further ado, let me introduce our guests. First, I'd like to start with Elizabeth Dornak. She's the board chair of NBAA, better known as the National Business Aviation Association. She also runs a Fortune 500 flight department. Now, she has over 9,000 hours of flying time as a pilot. Currently, she flies the Gulfstream 550. Yes, I'm a little jealous, but if I could even ride in it, I'd probably be happy about that. If it has anything to do with business flying, whether it's a small single engine Cessna, Piper, Cirrus, or whether it's the Gulfstream 550 or a Global or Cessna Longitude, Falcon 8X, whatever, everything in between, NBAA, the National Business Aviation Association, is your go-to when it comes to business aviation. So it's really great. Elizabeth, welcome to the show this morning.
Well, thank you, Vince. It's an honor and pleasure to be here.
Thank you. And then we have my other friend, Candace Covington. Candace is the Senior Director of Aviation at Adobe. She has over 10,000 hours of flying time. You're probably all familiar with Adobe products and services like Acrobat and Photoshop, Lightroom, Illustrator, and one of my favorites, their video editing software, Adobe Premiere. Welcome to the show, Candace.
Thank you so much, Vince. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
It's great to have you guys. I'm really looking forward to this conversation of us talking about why business aviation is so great, and it's something that we need to continue to promote and keep out there in the forefront to let people know of all the opportunities in the industry. I'd like to kind of start things off and talk a little bit about how you guys got started in flying. And Elizabeth, I'll start with you, since you started flying at 14 years old and soloed at 16, and the rest is history. Over 9,000 hours of it.
Well, yeah, thanks, Vince. So, this is business aviation in particular is a hard one to get into. And I think understanding the career paths within aviation can be a bit of a challenge when you're 14 or 16 years old to understand how do you make a career in aviation. I think, like most people, I thought the only way you could do it is through the military. That wasn't quite the road I wanted to go. So, but I was always, fascinated by airplanes, and the kid always looking up at the sky anytime an airplane flew overhead. I initially had the idea of I was going to become a doctor. I was born in Australia, so I was going to go back to Australia and become a flying doctor, and thereby combine a career with what I loved doing, which was flying airplanes. Fortunately, I discovered along the way that you could make a career without necessarily going through the military. And so kind of one thing led to another, and kind of all these years later, here I am.
What was that first spark? When did you say, you know what, I've got to go start taking flying lessons?
Um, I guess it would have been kind of in my early teens, 13 time frame. Just a fascination with airplanes and that excitement of, where's that airplane going? What are they doing? How do I get to do that? And so pestering my parents to drive me out to the little local airfield and take a lesson. And from the very moment that I got in a small airplane, I was bitten by the bug, right? And so
Yeah.
it just like, this is really cool. There's something really special about being able to look down on the earth and see it from a different vantage point, one that most people don't get to experience. And that just, I was hook, line, and sinker. I was captivated.
Yeah, like all of us aviators, you live and breathe aviation. Your husband's a pilot. And
Right.
did I see correctly that your daughter is actually learning to fly a helicopter?
That's correct, right? So she had a chance to go for a ride in Alaska, and then it was the same sort of thing. Just came home and was like, I need to do this. This looks really fun, and so she's kind of working in that direction. So
What's she training in? Robinson?
R-22, the
Yeah,
Robinson.
R-22.
Yeah.
Yeah, a little two-seater. Yeah, that must bring back memories for you.
It does. It was really bizarre driving her to the airport and sitting there waiting for her to finish her lesson. It was like, wow, this is a flashback.
Turnabout is fair play, right?
Right.
Yeah. Candace, how about you? What was the spark for you? How'd you get started?
So I was well into my career in graphic design in my late 20s, and actually read Richard Bach's Bridge Across Forever. He also authored Jonathan Livingston Seagull, but he's a pilot. And that book just spurred me on to go to the local airport and start taking flying lessons. I started purely for recreational reasons. And
Really? So
yeah,
prior to reading that book, you had not really given aviation much thought?
not at all.
And I didn't know you did graphic design. That's really cool.
Well, yeah. So
But wow, what a difference.
it was a hard right turn, Vince. One I have never regretted. But then,
Yeah.
like Elizabeth, as soon as I started flying, just completely fascinated and really mesmerized by, being airborne and just all of the technical skills that needed to go into getting from point A to point B. And, I felt really driven to excel and understand everything aviation.
Yeah. So you started out, as you said, you were in graphic design. You said you started flying as a recreational thing. Where was the transition that made you say, "Oh, I think I'm going to be a professional pilot"?
It was in my instrument training. So it took me about a year to get my private pilot's license because I was doing it while I was working full time. And a few months after I got my private, I realized that I needed to get an instrument rating so that I could legally fly in the clouds. And not that I flew in the clouds illegally, but and it was
In case the FAA is listening, I understand.
No, that would have been way too scary to fly in the clouds with just my private pilot's license.
Right.
But my instructor for my instrument training was also a professional pilot. He was flying for air ambulance, and I just was really intrigued by, all the opportunities out there that you could earn a living by flying. And so I started trying to develop a plan to figure out how I could basically shift careers and find my way into a professional pilot.
And you never look back.
And I never looked back.
Have you ever done anything in graphic design since?
Well, I came to Adobe. I feel like I came full circle, right?
Well, that's a great point. I should have picked up on that right away. Yeah, yeah.
So
touche to
definitely
you on
that
that one.
creativity. Yeah, I get to exercise my creativity here by.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we'll talk about that because you actually had to create a flight department for them, correct?
I did.
Yeah. So that means you started from scratch for them. I mean, you brought all of your experience from before. Elizabeth, how about you? What did you study in school?
Well, so again, I started out in pre-med at Purdue University, and
Oh,
then
so you were actually studying pre-med.
correct, right? And so I don't know why I was a little slow on the uptake. That Purdue actually had a really great aviation program, but it wasn't until I'd already been there a semester that I was like, hey, hanging out at the airport's a whole lot more fun than taking all the pre-med type of
Than
coursework.
being in the
And
lab?
yeah, right. So I was able to transfer into the aviation program my second semester, and then I already had my private pilot's license at that point, but I was able to get my instrument and commercial and kind of get the foundation for the career that I wanted through a Purdue's program.
Yeah, so you both are bringing up a really great point, and I really like to emphasize this, and we were talking about it a little bit before we got started, and that is that you don't have to quote unquote major in aviation to become a professional pilot or to work in this industry or any aspect of it. It's really about what your passion is and what your skill set is that can apply to somewhere in the industry. Yes, it can be a pilot or be a mechanic, but it could be just about anything else, which we'll kind of talk about. So it's really kind of cool to hear, you pre-med and then transition into aviation, even though the bug had bitten you when you were like 13 years old. And for you, Candace, to come from graphic design to designing flight plans stuff. I was trying to be clever. It didn't work. But anyhow, um, so if you guys could expound on that a little bit, your perspective, because both of you have had the opportunity to talk to young people about career paths and what kind of advice and perspective can you share with that? Either one of you.
I guess I'll start off with that, Vince, and say that follow your passion, right? And so, as you pointed out, it doesn't necessarily have to be as a pilot. There's lots of career opportunities within aviation and specifically business aviation. But don't let opportunities pass you by. It's seizing opportunities when they're in front of you. I think that's kind of one of the biggest takeaways that I've had throughout my career is, you often have those chances to walk through doors. Some doors lead to other doors, other doors close, right? But it's if you've got a passion for what it is you're doing, you'll end up in a good spot and doing things that you love doing.
Candace, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I definitely +1 on everything Elizabeth said. And, I would encourage young folks to really, develop leadership skills, right? Because every position and every role in aviation is a leader. And so anything you can do to, improve those skills, study business, right? Because we run businesses. And so that business acumen piece, in addition to the technical competencies that are required for whatever specific role you're passionate about, is really, really important. But I think if you follow Elizabeth's guidance of follow your passion, you can't go wrong. And then maybe lastly, take some risks, some calculated risks on some opportunities and look side to side because, the career path isn't always straight. And I think the richest careers come from a little bit of zigzagging.
Sure. Let's talk about career paths, and I'll come back to you, Elizabeth, starting with you. So you went from pre-med to getting in the aviation program at Purdue to eventually being in business aviation. Can you tell us how that transition happened and what drew you to business aviation specifically?
Sure. So after I graduated, I did go back to Australia. I was thinking, well, maybe I can get a job flying in Australia, which was kind of part of my initial goal anyway. When I discovered I'd had to take all the certification tests over again to be a certified Australian pilot, I was like, well, I didn't really examine my opportunities in the U.S. so talk about zigzags, right? So I ended up becoming a flight instructor near my hometown, and did that for about a year. And then I was able to get hired by Pan Am Express, and I was a ATR 42 instructor.
Pan Am, wow.
Yeah, so dates me a little, a lot maybe.
No comment.
But they had a commuter called Pan Am Express.
Right.
They ran ATR 42s, and I was able to work with pilots in the simulator in Toulouse, France.
The ATR 42, that's the twin engine turboprop, right?
Correct. That's right.
Just want to make sure I'm on my game.
All right. And so I did that for about a year, working kind of back and forth between the US and France, which was really cool. I was like 23 at the time. And
Wow.
then I got hired by essentially the company I'm still working for. So I was 25 when I got hired by a Fortune 500 flight department, and they had multiple bases. I was hired on the East Coast, and then had an opportunity to transfer down to Texas for a short while.
What were you flying when you first started with the Fortune 500?
King Air 200. So,
oh, wow.
Yeah.
Great airplane.
Yeah. Back in those days, they had quite a large flight department, kind of one of every business jet. And they had 3 King Airs, and I was brought in. Didn't even have an ATP at the time because I didn't have the hour requirements met at that point. But just kind of worked my way up through this corporation. So, how
long did it take you to transition from flying a King Air to one of the jets?
Well, I flew the King Air for about a year, and then, as I said, they had a variety of different airplanes. So the next airplane I went to was the Hawker. So they had a 400, a 600, and a couple of 800s. So, of course, that type rating allows you to fly all those different airplanes. But it's a common type rating for the
So you got a lot of variety early on in your career.
Right, exactly. So, and even transferring to the different base, it was like going to a different company in many ways. So it was kind of different culture and different way of doing things to a certain degree. Standardization started to get brought into kind of the DNA of how the flight department ran, but it was still kind of back in those early days. It was going through a transition. So I got to be part of that transition, and so that's kind of the beginning of the path for me.
Awesome. Candace, you said that your flight instructor for your instrument rating was working in business aviation at the time, I think. So was that the beginning of your kind of checking out that aspect of the industry?
Absolutely. I was learning to fly at, it was Centennial. Actually, it was Arapahoe County Airport in South Denver, now Centennial Airport. And so they had, a fair number of flight schools, but a lot of, business aviation activity at the location where the school was based. And so that's where I got exposed to this potential and all these opportunities.
Yeah. And so when did your actual career start with business aviation specifically?
So, excuse me, after I got my instrument rating, I had made the decision to change careers. I was living in Colorado at the time, and I knew that I was going to need to really focus on my commercial and I was going to go the flight instructor route in order to build time. And I
So
knew
it's time to get serious.
it was time to get serious. And I knew that I was going to need to change my environment and so that I could stay very singularly focused. So I actually left Colorado. I thought I was going to go to a school in Florida, but in my tour of flight schools in Florida, I didn't find one that really resonated with me. I was kind of a unusual candidate because, you know, I had a couple hundred hours and then my instrument rating, and most of these were ab initio schools where you started with 0 time. And so I didn't quite fit in very well. So I moved down to New Mexico where my father was building a house. And while I was there, I studied and took all of my knowledge tests. There were 5 that I needed to get through my initial CFI, and took all of those and then kept looking for a flight school and eventually found one in San Diego. And so I moved to San Diego and finished up my commercial training, commercial multi, my initial CFI instrument instructor and multi-engine instructor, and then ended up getting hired by the school that I did my instrument instructor training.
In one of the most fun cities to fly in.
You know, I thought I would be there 3 to 5 years, Vince, because I was going to go wherever I needed to go to pursue my aviation career. And I was there 27 years before I left to pursue this opportunity.
That will happen to you in San Diego. We'll have to talk offline about that because I flew a lot out of Montgomery Field there, some out of Lindbergh too. So anyhow, for another conversation, this is what happens when you get us all together. Elizabeth, you know, this is actually to both of you, but I'll start with you, Elizabeth. So let's talk a little bit more about the nitty gritty of flight departments. And we know they come in all shapes and sizes. You just talked about that a little bit, where it can be one aircraft, it can be a small aircraft or a big aircraft, or it can be, you know, like Walmart that has some 20, 21 aircraft or something like that. So a lot of it has to do with the mission of the company and what the company needs and things like that. So can we talk about that a little bit to give our viewers and listeners an idea of what a corporate flight department is all about? And I think a lot of people don't necessarily realize that it's more than just pilots and mechanics, that there's a lot more to it.
Sure, absolutely. So, you know, I think the key to a business or a corporation making the decision to having an aircraft is about as you point out, Vince, that it's about the mission. And so the aircraft is a tool to be able to transport people to whether it's customers or to plant sites or manufacturing sites, so they can you know, stay engaged and connected to their business. You know, I think it's often pointed out by NBAA that one of the signs of well-run companies is their access to private aviation, and having, whether it's their own airplane and flight department, or there are other ways to do it through jet cards or charter. Fractional, right. So all of those are also avenues for being able to, for a company to be able to have access to very specific and targeted strategic type of transportation tools. So and along with that come a myriad of different types of jobs that support those entities, whether it's the corporate flight department. Just within my organization, we just have one airplane, but there's 8 of us that support that airplane. So I've got 4 pilots, 2 technicians that do all the maintenance on the airplane, but they also act as flight technicians, so they fly with the airplane. And then I have a crew scheduler and a finance person. And so that, I think that's pretty typical of most smaller flight departments. And obviously these things are scalable, right? So the more airplanes you have, the more people you need to support it. But as you also point out, Vince, that the size of the airplane can vary from, a single engine airplane up to long range international and very capable airplanes. So it's just whatever the needs of the company are to be supported.
Yeah. Other than size of the flight department, the functionality is pretty much the same, whether it's a small one or a large one. I think you can speak to that, Elizabeth, because you mentioned that your company at one point had a large fleet. But the functionality of it, pretty much the same?
Yes, very much so. Yeah, so when I first got hired, we had 4 bases. There were over 80 pilots, 24 aircraft. As I pointed out, there was kind of like one of each airplane, and in some cases multiple copies. So, but not a lot of standardization, and so that kind of led to early on, each captain kind of had his way of wanting the cockpit run. And to me, that was a little frustrating, having come out of the rigor of Purdue's program. To be honest, early on, I was like, maybe
You
I should
guys
go
are
to the
flying by the
airlines.
seat of your pants. So,
Right.
so it's about safety culture as well.
Exactly. And so, but those things grew over time. And like I said earlier, I was able to be part of that change. And that was really that opportunity, the excitement of being able to implement and be part of the change was something that kept me here. It created a stickiness of that I wanted to stay and be part of an organization.
Sure. Candace, you have had a lot of experience with major flight departments, but this opportunity with Adobe, you actually had to start from scratch pretty much, right?
Yeah, which was one of the.
So tell us about building a flight department from the beginning.
Yeah. No, the opportunity to build a flight department from scratch, I looked at it as a once in a lifetime opportunity, especially for a Fortune 200 company, right? I mean, to Elizabeth's point, if you look at the Fortune 50 companies, the majority of them have corporate flight departments, and it just speaks to the value of the asset as a business tool and how it plays a significant role in the success of the business. And that was very much the driver for Adobe to get into the business aviation industry, was to create that seamless, frictionless travel experience for their executives. But I think organizations, it's really about the people, and that culture that we've kind of talked about, and mindset of the people and how they approach the flight operations, that rigor around operating procedures and standardization, and just always wanting to raise the bar in safety, but excellence in customer service, right? And how
Right.
we're delivering this experience to our traveling executives. So that opportunity to get to build a team was just really energizing for me, because I do think that the people, if you can get a group of people that are not necessarily all the same, you need some diversity and experiences and perspectives, because you need people to come and genuinely debate about what you're doing and how you're doing things, right? And so to have that opportunity to create that for Adobe, which from a corporate standpoint has values and capabilities, the way that they show up in business very much mirrors my own personal and professional desire and how an organization should function. And if I could just add one thing to what Elizabeth said,
Yes.
flight departments have a lot of commonality. We've got schedulers and dispatchers, and we have maintenance technicians, and we've got pilots, and some of us have cabin safety attendants, and we've got finance support staff, right? But there is just a wide range of support that every single flight department needs, from aircraft cleaners to the support we get from the aircraft manufacturers, right? People who specialize in interior design for these aircraft, from the people that support us when we're on the road. And so, the career opportunities in business aviation go much broader than the flight department, right?
Absolutely. You bring up a really great point about, which is one of the areas we wanted to touch on. But, it's going back a little bit to, you're talking about the team, building the team and teamwork, and how important that is in flight department operations. I've had the privilege of talking with a number of aviation directors, and that's as big of a focus point than everything else. In other words, yeah, the experience is important and things like that, and expertise, but being able to work together as a team. And I thought it was really neat what you brought up, and that is to be able to have some input that can have a positive impact on what the flight department is trying to accomplish. I think it's really neat that you look at it that way. The opportunities, I'm so glad you talked about not only within the flight department, but the external things that are needed to keep a good flight operation going and supported, and things like that. And it all ties in with, again, what you just said, which is the number of opportunities that are available in this industry, and that your expertise can be in areas that you may not be aware of. The other part that this brings to, and I welcome both of you to expand on it a bit, and that is the relationship with the company, with the corporation, which has many tentacles. It's the HR, it's human resources, it's the accounting department or the CFO, it's the C-suite executives. Some companies, it's also middle management and other people that need the services of the aircraft, and things like that. Of course, security. And then in terms of backgrounds, I happen to know another aviation director who came from security and now has, for the last at least a dozen years, been running, corporate flight departments. So welcome you guys to talk about that in terms of the relationship with the company that you fly for.
Please, Elizabeth.
Well, thanks, Candace. So I think it's a very interesting, and I think it's another piece that's evolved over time, where the flight department was for many years traditionally just out at the airport, separate from the corporation, and kind of almost forgotten about in many ways. I think in today's environments, most corporations have recognized that bringing a closer, tighter working relationship with the entire aviation team is valuable, both for the team members in aviation, but also for the corporation. And so, I didn't get the chance to start a brand new flight department from scratch, but I was asked to divide a flight department and create a new flight department out of an existing flight department.
Hey, that's
I'm
just
not
as
sure
impressive.
I'm not sure which is more difficult, because we had to divide the team in half, and there was some horse trading that had to take place.
Wow.
We got an older airplane, but a very reliable, very happy that we've got this airplane. But it was kind of all of the pieces that took place. And it required an immense coordination with the corporation to be able to make that happen. And so, we had, and initially I was reported into finance. So I reported directly to the CFO. And then that's since changed. I now report into the HR, Chief Operating Officer. And but that connection that we have with the corporation, I think, is really important, really from a mindset for the employees, because within aviation, they have a better understanding of why we're doing the trips that we're doing, how important those trips are, some of the stressors that may be that may exist with our passengers. And so for us, it's raised the bar to be even better than we were, right? And so we're constantly trying to put ourselves in their shoes to understand, this airplane, when they're traveling, is a sanctuary for them, and we need absolute perfection in everything that we're doing. But it's kind of a space where they can unwind and relax and maybe continue to do the business that they're doing. But so it's worked out well for us to have that relationship that's a much tighter and more nuanced arrangement with the executives and the corporation as a whole.
Sure. Candace, how about your perspective? You seem to be very tuned in with your company as well.
Yeah, and that was the other thing that was intriguing for me about this opportunity, because, I really admire Adobe and the Adobe brand. And so to be an integral part of that organization, much to what Elizabeth was saying, is, the flight department it's another business unit within the broader enterprise organization, but you're a significant ambassador for that company's brand, right? So all of the vision and mission statements of that corporation trickle down to the flight department. And that was really important to me, that, we weren't just this organization that sat, very much disconnected, that we were fully embedded and integrated into Adobe as an organization and enterprise. And
Sure.
That's certainly the way it feels. And it's, to Elizabeth's point, I think it makes a big difference in engagement and motivation and driving to, go above and beyond in creating those exceptional experiences.
Right.
I'm going to come back to something that you were talking about also earlier, Candace, and that both of you can speak to it. But with and I'm not doing a big comparison here, but with the airlines, the pilots, their contact with the passengers is pretty minimal. I mean, they come in and they the good pilots or captains will say hello and kind of give you a preview of what the flight's going to be like, et cetera, and so forth. But most of the contact is with the flight attendants and et cetera. Very different in corporate aviation and business aviation, because you're flying a lot of times the highest level of people in the company, or it can be a mix. It just depends on the company and what the mission is. And you were touching on that, Candace, about the importance of customer service and of being attentive, and all of these things tie into things like the responsibility for the pilots with catering, and if a flight technician's on board, not only do they know how to fix the plane, but they also know how to deal with who's in the back, as we like to say, or who's in the cabin, and all of these kind of things. Can both of you talk to that a bit?
Sure. I mean, early on, when I was trying to determine what path I wanted to take in aviation, I certainly looked at the airlines and quickly realized that, I don't do cog in the machine very well. Like, I need to have a more direct impact into driving decisions and solutions and innovating, right? Like coming up with new creative ways to achieve a goal, right? And make it more efficient and effective. And so for me, I just was always driven towards business aviation for those reasons, because you were going to have a much more integral role in problem solving and working directly with the C-level suite in ensuring that these executives got where they needed to be when they needed to be there. And that was very exciting for me.
Yeah, I can throw a little funny one in there for you guys. I had a conversation with one of the Fortune 500 flight department directors one time, and he said that they've done what you guys call an around the world in like a Gulfstream 650, and would lose internet connection maybe 30 minutes out of that entire around the world flight. But that's what was talked about when he got back. It's like, yeah, how come the internet went down, and why did it take so long for it to come back up? So it really does speak to that. Well, I have something else I wanted to go to, but before I did it, Elizabeth, did you want to add anything to what Candace just said?
I think Candace said it perfectly. I couldn't improve upon that. So,
and she has firsthand experience because she was at the airlines and jumped ship. So I think that speaks very highly for business aviation.
Right. Exactly.
I think it does. So one of the things, one of the almost nuance of business aviation is it's a bit of beck and call, meaning that you guys have to be ready to go when the executives. I know that flights can be scheduled and things like that, but if a business deal comes up and they want to roll the next morning or that evening or whatever, you guys you have to roll. And then if it's one of those things where you fly somewhere and it ends up being multiple stops that may, in other words, you were going to fly to Europe and you're going to be back, the next day, but now while they're over there, they decide to do something else. I just want to talk about that because that's a big difference. With an airline schedule, you get the schedule for the month, you pretty much know the routes you're going to fly. But in business aviation, that can be a lot different.
So I think Candace really hit upon it. When you develop a great team, part of that teamwork is supporting each other. And so understanding how first of all, flexibility's got to be built into the team that you create. So people have to understand that's kind of the lifestyle, that you're essentially on standby. I mean, we have, we offer 2 days off a week and give comp days and so forth, but it's not the same as the airlines. But in that, there comes a level of respect and a level of working with each other and helping each other out. If you know somebody's got an obligation that they need to keep with their family, that you say, hey, listen, I'll take that trip for you. And then, it gets paid back at some point in the future. And I think it can be seen as a downside to this industry, quite frankly, but it's also, you learn to work with it, and it also creates amazing opportunities and chances to see things that you just don't see with the airlines. And so I've always looked at the glass as being half full, not half empty. And just, you learn to work around the flexible nature of the schedule requirements.
Well, I think you also bring up a really good point about the teamwork and the fact that I know that a number of aviation directors are now focused more on, quality of life for their staff, for their team, to try to mitigate that a bit so that even though it is what it is, and I think you bring up one of the most attractive aspects of what you guys do, and that is the places that you can end up going and things you see, not to mention the aircraft you fly. So it definitely has some positive aspects to it. So that's kind of neat to hear that. One of the things I wanted to spend the last part of this program doing is I like to tell our viewers and listeners what for them to hear perspective about how they can better prepare if they're already showing an interest. For example, if they're in school right now, they were thinking of going the airline route, and now they listen to you guys and go, oh, maybe I should think about this business aviation thing. What suggestions do you have to them to prepare themselves or to move in that direction towards getting a career or getting into business aviation?
You want to start, Elizabeth?
Sure. So, Vince, I think you kind of hit upon it at the very beginning, and that is you hung out at an airport. You took the time to kind of get to know this industry. And I think that's what it takes is um, the roadmap within business aviation is not as clear as it is within the airlines. The airlines provide a lot of structure and predictability in career paths and the opportunities that exist. But for all the things that Candace has hit upon for the opportunities that you get within business aviation, it takes a little bit more effort. You do need to look to the left and to the right to see what other things exist. But once you start to develop a network of individuals and essentially mentors, friends that can lead you to other opportunities, it just really opens up a world that is perhaps sometimes a little hidden, but it is well worth the effort to try to seek out those opportunities. And there are so many people that are willing to help. And I think that's really the key is the passion that people have in business aviation. I think I'm going to go out on a limb and say I think it surpasses that of the airlines. I think most airline pilots are just there to fly their trips and collect the paycheck and go home. Whereas people within business aviation, it's a lifestyle. It's a they want to give back to the industry. I know Candace has been involved with many things within NBAA over the years. I certainly have. So there's associations like the National Business Aviation Association that it's an opportunity to give back for all the things that we've gotten. And those organizations, they do an amazing job of networking people, and they have mentorship programs and scholarships, and so there's just a lot of people out there that want to help. And I think
Can I put you guys on the spot for a second? So let's say I'm a senior graduating from an Embry-Riddle, Purdue, UND, and I'm on that track for becoming a professional airline pilot. But I've discovered that business aviation is more something that I'm more interested in. But I have 700, 800 hours. So I've got a ways to go to get there in terms of getting in the right seat of a corporate aircraft. Would taking a job in another area at a flight department, maybe in scheduling or something like that, is that an okay route to take that can eventually lead you? Because you get from my perspective, this is more me just saying this, I think you can learn a lot if you're doing another position, and then when you finally have the qualifications in terms of flight time, then you hopefully get something opens up and you get an opportunity.
I think that's a fantastic strategy, right? And to Elizabeth's point, it allows you to start building that network. You're in industry, right? You have all that exposure to peer flight departments, all the other roles within a flight department. So plus you learn a lot. So when you get that pilot position, you're a much more well-rounded pilot because you are able to come to that role with other perspectives that, somebody that's just been solely on the pilot track doesn't necessarily appreciate the other functional area. And Vince, if I could just make two other plugs for business aviation that really
please plug away.
The professional development opportunities in business aviation are vast. I mean, safety, sustainability, anything about rigor around flight operations. And then also, something Elizabeth said really resonated with me that, business aviation, it's a unique industry. And I think community is just it's a really fabulous community to be a part of. And even though we do the same function and deliver the same services for all different types of corporations, which I think is one of the fascinating things about business aviation, because you can, fly for a coffee company or a pharmaceutical or a technology company. I mean, they're just vast opportunities that make it a really exciting community.
Great points. Yeah, absolutely. I didn't know if you wanted to chime in on that too, Elizabeth.
No, I mean, I think that's it, that it's the varied ways to get to where you want to be. I think, your point about, do you come in at a certain level within a flight department and then kind of work your way up? I mean, that's certainly for pilots, that's one way of accomplishing it. I mean, to be frank, there might be other ways where you build up flight hours within a commuter airline. So you build up time that way, and then make that commitment to go to business aviation and transfer
once you've
over.
built the time.
Yeah, right. And so, but I think that's the point, is that there's so many different ways to get to that end result, which is flying or maintaining or scheduling airplanes. But it's how you get your foot in the door. What makes you unique? How do you be authentic to what it is you do and what the corporation does? I mean, kind of all of those pieces play into what can ultimately be a fantastic career for people.
Absolutely. You're the board chair for NBAA. Why don't you tell us a little bit about some of what NBAA does with your programs? For example, in terms of networking, your convention doesn't get any better with the 1,000+ exhibitors and in every aspect of the industry. But it's also, you guys have your YoPro program and things like that. Can you speak to that a little bit, Elizabeth?
Sure, absolutely. So, I was probably, it was probably in the 1990s that I went to my first NBAA convention. And I had no idea that this industry was as big as it is. And Candace brought this up with the people that do the interior design of the aircraft, the fixed base operators that support the aircraft movements, all of the OEMs that manufacture these airplanes, and all the support and the people that go behind that. To me, I was just thinking flight departments, pilots, mechanics, schedulers,
right.
And that was it, right?
I
And
remember
then
those
there's
thoughts.
this whole other universe out there.
Yes.
And so that convention is an amazing opportunity to really get a chance to see how broad this industry truly is, and the types of skill sets that are needed. And we haven't even hit upon the advanced air mobility and kind of what's going on in that whole part of the industry, and how that's going to change things, I think, very fundamentally going forward. But yes, NBAA's a great resource. They have a fantastic website, and they do things like the YoPro initiatives, where it's opportunities for young people to network, to kind of compare notes on career paths, and how do you get jobs, and once you get a job, how do you keep the job, and how do you take advantage of the career development that may exist. There's a whole structure of committees that support NBAA, and that's actually how I first got involved with NBAA, was through the committee structure. And again, it's an opportunity to give back, which I think can be very powerful and very engaging.
Absolutely. And the other part with your YoPro program for NBAA is the kids get to network with their peers as well. So those who are on the same page trying to do the same thing, they can, share notes and thoughts with each other about that. So I think that's a neat aspect. I'm a little biased about NBAA after having worked with it for 9 years. So, but I think that's a really good point. We're going to run out of time here. But I just wanted to make sure that, and you brought it up a little bit. I wanted to see if you guys had any further thoughts about the future. I actually, the industry is growing leaps and bounds, and there was a discussion a few years ago about workforce shortages and concerns, and guess what? We're right back there again, right? So here we go, with a whole lot of opportunity there to fill some positions and to see this industry continue to grow. I So before we wrap up, I'll say this, and this is a kind of a compliment to you, Elizabeth, because you're my hero in another respect, and that is that you have two kids. They're similar ages to mine, but you and your husband have managed to both have flying careers and raise these kids and balance it all, which I think is, I wanted to just touch on that briefly because I think that's an important aspect to point out, that it is possible to do that. You run a flight department, you fly, your husband flies, you have two great kids.
Well, thanks, Vince. Yeah, it's, I guess at the end of the day, you can have it all, right? And so whatever it is that you want, you can have it, right? And so, for me, having a family was important. Again, I had worked for a company that was supportive and gave me the time off to be able to, um, get through a pregnancy and have time off afterwards. But it takes a network, a structure, kind of behind the scenes, also to make that happen and be successful. But it's possible, and it's again, it's just a matter of priorities. I used to drag my kids to a lot of the NBAA meetings because for me I spent so much time traveling for my job that when I was doing this volunteer work for NBAA, it was important that they get to be exposed to part of my life and to see.
Which is how I know your kids.
Exactly, right. And but it introduced them to business aviation as well, and they got to see what mom was doing. But it was also a chance for me to be able to spend time with my kids. And so that balance that you have to strike with that is you just have to do it. And sometimes it's awkward. Sometimes little kids can not necessarily behave the way you want them to, but you just take it all in stride. And
Sure.
So that's what I tried to do.
And Candace, your husband flies, and he's a great example of somebody persevering and determining what level of flying he wanted to do and having to invest in that. I remember the conversations with you about that. How's he doing, and how's that going for you guys?
He's doing great. It's kind of ironic because we both fly the G650.
That's right. He's 650 type now too.
Yeah. No, he's doing really well. Thank you so much for asking about him. Vince.
Yeah, and you guys have to balance that, and
yeah, I mean,
you move from San Diego to Northern Cal.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have kids, so that makes it a little bit easier for sure. We were both late bloomers. We married both later in our life and well established in our careers. But yeah, Vince, I did want to add two things. One,
Sure.
that Elizabeth said, with NBAA, volunteering and scholarships. I mean, I think for young people that really want to find these stretch opportunities and kind of go dip their toe into some, learning other skills or project management or leadership or something, volunteering is a great way to a safe place to sort of stretch yourself professionally. And then this industry just has lots of scholarships. So being able to, use those resources and apply all over the place. Because I know it's really troubling when we have these scholarships and you only get a handful of applicants.
I know. I'm so glad you brought that up, Candace. That's a real key point. And there are a ton of scholarships out there.
Tons of scholarships.
AOPA has a bunch, NBAA, Gamma, all these guys, women in aviation, women in corporate aviation, they all have scholarships, and all of them sing the same tune. They said, we have trouble finding people to give the scholarships to. And I find that even when I tell parents that their kid can get a scholarship, I have to follow up with them to say, hey, did you have them apply? So I'm glad you brought that up. And then the volunteering is actually fun. And it is a great way to network. And if you, as I like to tell young people, if you offer up your services to be able to volunteer, you never know what it's going to lead to. It's going to open up relationships that it may benefit you in a week, a month, or a couple of years, but it will benefit you. So I'm thank you for bringing that up.
You can build your brand in the industry, right? I mean,
absolutely, absolutely.
Know who you are and what you bring to the table, and I think that's really, really important.
That's absolutely true. Well, we have kind of run out of time. I'd like to let each one of you make a closing comment. I'll start with you, Candace, and then and we'll wrap things up.
Well, Elizabeth mentioned it multiple times, networking, and I'm a strong believer that if people have the courage to reach out and message me on LinkedIn, I will certainly respond. So if anyone in the audience has any other questions or whatnot that they think that I might be able to shed some light on, please look for me on LinkedIn.
Elizabeth?
Yeah, thanks, Vince. So I'd say the same thing, that I'm on LinkedIn as well. If you can look for my profile, I'd be happy to answer any questions people have. And I guess I just like to say, don't be discouraged if things don't start out going in the direction you think they should be, that if you persevere and you, again, seize opportunities, you'll be surprised at where you may end up. And like we've said, I think through the last hour, that this is an amazing industry with amazing people in it, and come be part of it.
Yeah, and on that note, I'll just say, so I was at Textron a couple of weeks ago doing a show from there, and prior to the show, I met one of the employees, and I just, curiosity, I said, oh, so a young lady, I said, where are you in school? She said, yeah. And I said, what are you studying? Well, she said, I have an undergrad in agricultural communication, something along those lines. Of course, my next question is, what's that? But and then she said she was working on her master's, supported by Textron, in a similar area, but with an emphasis on sustainability. And I thought, well, here's somebody that's into environmental stuff that, I'll keep a long story short, she kind of accidentally stumbled into working for Textron. Textron has embraced her and said, well, we have this other area of sustainability that's become very important. And so now she's working in that area and working on her master's degree related to it. But who knew?
That's a great story.
Aviation wasn't even on her radar, or nowhere near it, actually. So I think that kind of emphasizes the point that we've been talking about overall and through this hour, and that is, if you have the interest and or even if you don't know exactly what you're going to do, if it leads to aviation, you're gonna benefit. There's going to be a lot of opportunity for you there. So, ladies, it's been a pleasure with having both of you on. I actually consider it a treat, a privilege, an honor to have the two of you on together and talk about a great industry, or a great aspect of aviation, and wish you both well with you and continued success with running your flight departments and everything that you do, and have some fun, continue to build those hours and some pretty cool aircraft. So thank you very much, both of you, for being on All Things Aviation and Aerospace.
Thanks, Vince. Thanks, Elizabeth.
Thank you, Candace. Thanks, Vince. Talk to you soon.
All right, thanks. Well, that's it for All Things Aviation and Aerospace.